Remember back in the day when you wanted to play a video game on your TV? You just pop it in your console and play away. No need to download updates or install anything on your hard drive. Back then, games were simple, and that was part of the magic. You didn't have to spend hours figuring things out. You just picked up the controller and got right into it. With the popularity of video games at an all-time high, retro gaming went from being a cheap hobby for the few to becoming a big deal in pop culture. The really old consoles like the NES, Sega Genesis, and Super Nintendo used to be commonly found at garage sales and thrift stores. But now, some 40 years later, if you want one of these, you have to actively search out these systems. But is it even worth it trying to find and maintain old consoles anymore? With powerful modern systems, advanced emulation, and subscription services that give us instant access to libraries of classic titles, do vintage consoles still have a place in today's gaming world? So maybe I'm weird, but I consider old consoles to be more than just machines. They're like time capsules filled with cherished memories and personal achievements. The NES is one of my favorite consoles. This guy released in the mid-1980s and was a game changer for many families, like mine, introducing them to the wonders of home gaming. To me, playing an old console like the Sega Genesis feels like a trip down memory lane. The sights, sounds, and even the feel of the controller in my hands sends me back to a time when gaming felt pure and fresh. Yes, the old school console setup is fun, but it's not always practical. If you're gonna buy and collect old hardware these days, you'll soon understand the need for a classic CRT television. One of the major hurdles of retro gaming today is the inevitable shortage of CRTs. These were the go-to monitors back in the day for most vintage consoles, and there was a time when people couldn't give them away. Eventually, everyone upgraded and threw out their old sets, so there's just not as many of them around anymore. Unfortunately, modern flat-screen TVs aren't exactly made for old systems. You'll be lucky to have any analog inputs on a modern TV, and even when they were common, they often had input lag and scaling issues that would make the games look and play poorly. For a lot of people, the only way to get that authentic retro gaming experience is to invest in a CRT. These big heavy displays may appear to be outdated, but CRTs are actually superior for retro gaming. They have next to no input lag and much greater motion clarity than your typical modern TV. This makes fast-paced games like Sonic the Hedgehog or Mortal Kombat a whole lot more enjoyable. However, finding a good CRT can be tough. They're almost impossible to find in really good condition, and even if you do find one, transporting and maintaining them can be a pain. I mean, you can always play on a modern TV, but in order to do that, you need to buy a video converter, and even the cheapest ones are pretty expensive. Sure, you can find some super cheap adapters on Amazon and eBay, but those are for like VCRs, not for gaming. For games, you'll want something that's specifically designed for low latency, line doubling, and de-interlacing. And even the cheapest of these adapters will cost you around $40 to $140, which is a lot of money for an adapter that only outputs a 480p image. These days, 480p is super tiny and can look pretty blurry when you blow it up to just 1080p. But most TVs now are 4K, and that's 27 times more pixels than 480p. That's a whole lot of stretching on the image. Using S-video cables are a must for systems like the Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64, but if you're just using a straight composite connection, like the one on the side of the NES, it's not gonna look pretty. I know, you might get used to the low quality after a while, but I guess I'm just getting old, because trying to play a game with blurry graphics like this hurts my head after a while. There are some higher quality upscalers like the RetroTink 4K or the OSSC Pro that can better adapt the picture quality for modern displays, but they come with a steep price tag. But hey, if you are able to get an old console up and running, I'm happy to report that we are now in the future, where there's a thriving retro gaming accessory market, which introduced modern conveniences to vintage systems. Bluetooth adapters, for instance, will allow you to use wireless controllers with your old hardware. This N64 adapter here will actually send rumble to your Bluetooth controller, and it has a built-in memory card where you can connect to it from your computer and back up your save files. We also have newly manufactured controllers, some really good ones from third parties. But even Nintendo makes really cool wireless versions of their classic controllers. And since they are Bluetooth, you can use them on your old consoles with an adapter. So yeah, if you want to play games on a retro console today, there's a lot to know, and probably a lot of things to buy. Kinda makes you wonder, why even bother with an old console when you could just pay for Nintendo Switch Online and get a great picture quality at a fraction of the price? Well, for me, physical media is important. There's something uniquely satisfying about holding a physical game in my hands, and as someone who mainly collects games that have personal significance, sometimes I find there's more to it than just the gameplay. I find that physical copies carry an emotional weight that digital downloads just can't match. Besides the good vibes, one of the most special aspects of physical games is the ability to share them with others. Handing a friend a cartridge of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time instantly grants them access to the same experience you once had. These were the full games, and we're not missing any features or DLC. No internet required. The fact that none of these companies have the power to take away my copy of Mr. Mosquito or any of my other physical games is a security that digital platforms, with their DRM restrictions and account locking mechanisms, will never replicate. Unfortunately, digital games are the future. How many NES consoles do you think will still be around in 40 years from now? How about 400 years from now? Eventually, all that original hardware will turn to dust. Consoles like the NES and Sega Genesis are already decades old now, and thankfully were built like tanks. But we're talking about home consoles from 40 years ago. They were never designed to live that long, and are bound to need service eventually. Common problems like failing capacitors, worn out cartridge connectors, and dead lasers. If you don't know how to solder and fix things yourself, repairs can be pricey, and finding quality replacement parts is always getting harder. Another challenge of collecting physical games is the prevalence of counterfeit games in the retro market. You'd expect popular games like Pokemon Emerald and Chrono Trigger to have a lot of fakes out there, some of which can be difficult to distinguish from genuine cartridges. But even common games are being bootlegged nowadays, and if you're buying physical games, you really gotta know what to look out for. I've explored this issue in detail in a previous video, so check that out if you want to know more. And finally, when it comes to buying and collecting retro games, there's the question of cost, and what is it worth to you? The increasing popularity of retro gaming, along with factors like inflation, have driven up prices for vintage consoles and games. A loose copy of games like Zelda or Kirby's Adventure have now hit over $30, where just 10 years ago were around the $10 mark. But $30 for an NES game is actually still on the cheap end these days. According to price charting, the average price of an NES game is now over $40. At some point, it's just not worth it anymore. Especially for those of us who are not trying to start a museum and just want to relive our childhood memories. The retro revival going on in the gaming industry has really taken shape over the last few years, introducing modern alternatives that offer convenience, enhanced performance, and more accessibility options. Emulators are programs that replicate the functionality of older consoles on modern hardware. Usually, when you think of emulation, you think of the PC. But emulators are actually what power most of the classic game re-releases on modern consoles like the Switch and PS5. If you're playing a classic game on a new system, chances are it's running on an emulator. But yeah, the PC is the ultimate platform for emulation. Advanced emulators like PCSX2 for PlayStation 2 games deliver exceptional emulation quality that far surpasses the capabilities of the original consoles. For instance, these emulators allow you to upscale the graphics to 4K resolutions, add trophies to any game you can think of. You can modify the controls, apply high-quality CRT filters to mimic the appearance of old TVs, and even punch in some Game Genie cheats. Dude, this is like a Super Mario circus. Yes, emulation is a good thing, but even emulation has its own challenges. With the open nature of emulation, it's very easy to blur the lines between legal and illegal. For it to be legal, emulation requires you to own and rip your original copies of the games you want to emulate. You can't just download them online. It's not difficult to do with an external DVD drive for things like PS2 games, but cartridges require special hardware that can be difficult or expensive to get your hands on. For those who want the simplicity of console gaming without the hassle of old hardware or setting up emulators, remastered editions and re-releases offer the perfect solution, blending nostalgia with modern technology to keep classic games relevant. Modern remasters like Quake 1 and Quake 2 bring updated 4K visuals, enhanced multiplayer, achievements or trophies, and even a new game engine to the table. And this has the added bonus of introducing new audiences to the game, helping the classics stay relevant in an ever-changing gaming industry. Now, subscription services are one of the newest ways you can access retro games, providing vast libraries of classic titles for a low monthly fee. Platforms like Nintendo Switch Online or the Classics catalog on PlayStation Plus make it easier than ever to explore gaming history without the need for expensive hardware or physical media. You just pay one fee and then you can play an all-you-can-eat buffet of games until your subscription runs out. It reminds me of back in the day when we used to rent video games. You got to play a lot of games, but at the end of the day, you don't own anything. Some people see these subscription services as a cost-effective or even space-effective alternative to collecting physical retro games. For a fraction of the price of a single average loose NES cartridge, you can access over 100 retro games on platforms like Nintendo Switch Online, which offer an ever-growing library of NES games, SNES games, and Game Boy titles on the base subscription. But despite their ease of use, subscription services have some of the worst and most restrictive limitations. First of all, everything is temporary. You own none of these games, and can only play them how or when the company chooses. Subscription models emphasize convenience over ownership, and eventually all the subscription services and digital download servers will be shut down. When that sad day comes, when they flip the servers off, all of your games will be gone. So to answer that burning question, are old consoles still relevant? The answer is yes, but not for nearly as many people as it once was. There are so many hurdles to jump through that it does take a very dedicated person to still want to chase the retro console dream these days. But if you've already got a collection of classic games and consoles, CRTs, don't ditch it for the new stuff. But I would also say now might not be the best time to start collecting, especially when it comes to cartridges. If all you're after is the greatest hits of gaming in high definition, chances are those games have already been re-released, or will be soon. We are in an incredible time for gaming history, with classic games making a huge comeback. It feels like every other week, another retro game is back in the spotlight, and honestly, it's hard to keep up. But that's what makes it so exciting. Despite the challenge of using retro hardware today, these games are still staying accessible, relevant, and just as fun as ever. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for your time today. Goodbye.